one more indication of the barbarity of this organization.
In the case of terrorist kidnap, no ransom should be paid.
Salam alaikum, brothers.
The blood of David Haynes was on your hands, Cameron.
You mark my words, if they get past us, they'll come for you.
The growth of Islamic State has been as astonishingly quick as it has been brutal. They've established themselves as the most recognisable terror brand in the world. Al-Qaeda is almost considered moderate these days. Islamic State is forging links with other terror groups around the globe, and they're willing to claim under their umbrella. Small groups too, like the Charlie Hebdo killers, are linked to IS. Their strategy is to create a caliphate in Syria and Iraq and bring chaos to the region. But is that it? Arguably not. Islamic State has a higher goal: to provoke a global religious war, pitting all society against itself. The question is, can they achieve it? The arid open spaces of northern Syria and the plentiful supplies of oil in these enormous oil fields are where Islamic State have grown and plotted their expansion. It has been extremely well organised from the start. The use of social media and the production of high-quality promotional videos has allowed Islamic State to cement their brand, convey their message of jihad. But crucially, it's allowed them to effectively terrify the world from the comfort of the cities, towns and villages they control. As a media strategy, it isn't just successful, it's genius. Just warped, cruel and barbaric. They've taken many hostages, the majority of foreigners released after payments by nations prepared to do just about anything to save the lives of their citizens. Britain, the United States and Japan choose not to cooperate. The murders of their nationals have been uncompromisingly brutal. More often than not, apparently carried out by this man, a Briton known as Jihadi John. The treatment and murder of captured Syrian soldiers has been equally horrific. Every event more gruesome than the last. For some of those fighting Islamic State, the organisation has defied all previous thinking.
It's almost like super terrorism. It's an advance in the aggression. I remember here with Ansar al-Islam, with Jund al-Islam, etc., for example, it was very difficult to get one person to behead somebody. Now they seem to be falling over themselves to do these acts of butchery. It definitely is a different kind of terrorism. It's a much more aggressive, more merciless, brutal system. And I say again, this is the front on the war on terrorism. And if we don't stop this here, they will come for the West. They'll come for England, they'll come for Europe, they'll come for the United States. They need to be stopped, and they need to be stopped decisively.
The roots of Islamic State stretch back to the war in Iraq. Relentlessly targeted by American, British and Iraqi security services and eventually shunned by Sunni tribes, they lost their grip. But in the chaotic uprising against the regime of Bashar al-Assad's Syria, they found a fertile ground to grow. And a disorganised opposition to infiltrate and ultimately overwhelm.
ISIS clearly enjoys the tension between the Middle East, between Saudi Arabia, Iran, between Syria, between Turkey, that ISIS is very conveniently able to exploit for its own advantage. ISIS is not just trying to establish itself as sort of the dominant Islamist group in the region and in the world, but also it is a threat to the stability of the region, just the regular political stability of the region, because it is exploiting the weaknesses, the structural, the systematic weaknesses of the regime, of the administration of the surrounding countries.
The only effective on-the-ground military opposition to Islamic State has been the Kurdish security forces, made up of the proud but often poorly equipped Peshmerga and assisted by the better trained and armed counter-terrorism group. They have protected Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan. But the fighting has been harsh and has cost many Kurdish lives. The decision by the American-led coalition to intervene militarily through a campaign of aerial assaults has paid dividends. Islamic State have lost ground in areas where the Kurdish ground troops and the coalition planes have coordinated their action. The relief of Kobani, after months of IS attacks, is the best example. But there's a growing feeling that it simply isn't enough, though, ironically, that is exactly what Islamic State wants, especially the intervention of Western soldiers.
ISIS has a product to sell, the idea of an Islamic caliphate, and it is more than willing to go as far as it needs with all of its propaganda to create this sense of need for a representative of the world's Muslims that can actually take a stand against the West, take a stand against international forces seen to be a threat to devoted Muslims.
By taking the fight, or encouraging the fight to take place against them in Arab countries, be it Iraq and Syria, just underscores their position,
Yes,
as they see as the arbiters of all things to do with
Islam. Exactly, and that's the great problem, which is why, said again, having Arab states send in foreign troops is going to be the perfect situation compared to the UK and the US doing so, because we need a visible Muslim contingent that is fighting ISIS, preferably Sunni.
As IS has grown, it's revealed its intention to be the standard bearer of jihad, urging foreign fighters to join the cause.
This is a message to the brothers who stayed behind.
To travel to the region to fight. And they have come from around the world. Britain, all of Europe and North America is represented here. The fear is that they will return to continue the fight at home. The Paris attacks and the links to Syria are clear indicators that this is more than a possibility. Some here fear that the IS intention is not just to kill and maim abroad, but to fundamentally destabilise relations between different communities, pitting Muslims, Christians and Jews against one another. Effectively, a holy war.
It's everything that ISIS is designing their message to British society, to Western society, turn against your Muslims. Because the message we want to get across as ISIS is that you hate them. We're telling the Muslim community you despise Muslims for being Muslims. And if you can show them that you despise them for being Muslims, our job is done. So if they can sow discord amongst our countries here, they've won. And we've let them win. We've let them win. If we, the biggest asset of the West is our freedom, is our liberties. If we ourselves, as society, call for an erosion of those freedoms, call for people to be locked up because they follow a certain religion or express a certain viewpoint, view them with suspicion. If we erode those principles ourselves, we're doing the job of the terrorists for them. We're letting them win. We're giving them victory.
But Islamic State isn't just content with destabilising countries like Iraq and Syria, Israel and Jordan and Iran, for example. It is building alliances and spreading its tentacles across the world. While Islamic State is centred on what it describes as a caliphate straddling Syria and Iraq, its sphere of influence is growing. It's part of their strategy. Further to the east in Afghanistan and Pakistan, elements of the Taliban have indicated support for IS. But the terror group is also building a presence here to ensure Taliban compliance. In Africa, the well-established Islamic fundamentalist groups like Al-Shabaab in Somalia, who carry out attacks across the border in Kenya, are now working as an IS affiliate. To the north, in the countries of Nigeria and Mali, terror groups are in regular contact with and are open supporters of IS. The mass kidnapping and mass murders by Boko Haram in the north of Nigeria are part of its efforts to establish their own caliphate. And in Libya, the location of the West's previous significant intervention, IS-supporting militias have taken control of Tripoli and are engaged in a battle to extend their power base across the country.
Just like the international coalition, it's like a multi-headed hydra, but you've got two coalitions forming. And so this multi-headed hydra of Islamic terror that has 10 different heads, with the chief head being that of the Islamic State. And that is how I see the future for the Islamic State, rather than all the groups merging together to form this one big, global caliphate, a homogenous caliphate. I don't see it as a homogenous caliphate. I see it as an octopus with tentacles of different lengths.
As Britain itself questions the strategies being employed to counter Islamic State, it's clear the international community agree on action. Just what more is the question? Jordan finds itself the most vociferous, the most determined to seek revenge and destroy IS. But there is no question Islamic State's ambitions of creating regional chaos, promoting international social discord and spreading jihad is working. Finding a way to counter it is the key, one of the greatest challenges in the world today.